Hello and welcome again. Last video we discussed on how to use Java to generate the key for the DES cipher. But that's the only thing we discussed, just the key. So you either get the key and let Java generate a random key for DES for you, or you can use a string of characters as a password, for example, to generate the key. So we talked about this process already. Now, the next thing that we're gonna do today is let's talk about the process here. So basically, what we're gonna do is we're gonna create a DES cipher here. So basically, with all the things that are inside, which you remember is the rounds, the f function with the x boxes and all that. So from now on, we're just gonna look at this as a black box, and we're gonna create a DES in Java cipher that's gonna do the encryption decryption for us. And the way that's gonna be done is, again, because Java is an object-oriented programming language, we will make an object that's gonna be an object DES, or a cipher that is gonna use the DES algorithm. So how are we gonna do that? So the way we're gonna do it is we're gonna use a class called Cipher. Now that class Cipher, you can use it to create ciphers, not only for DES, but for other algorithms. Now in this particular case, because we're gonna use DES, then that's the one we're gonna use. We're gonna use a cipher of type DES, but this class can also be used to create some other ciphers. So for example, the ones we're gonna use, the one we're gonna see later, that advanced encryption standard, we're gonna use the same class for that. So how are we gonna create an object here? So the usual way. So the usual way is this. So what you do is you type cipher, as it is here. So cipher, capital C. You give a name to your object, which is, I'm not writing down anything here. I'm just gonna denote it by this purple rectangle. And every time you see this purple rectangle throughout this video, it means the name of your cipher. This is your variable name, and again, you can name it whatever you want. So it doesn't matter what you name it, as long as, again, you follow the standards of Java. And that's your name. So you can call it whatever you want. And then say equals cipher that get instance. You see, this is very similar to when you were doing the key. There's also a method called get instance. So what this happens is, what we are saying here is, I'm going to create a cipher, an object cipher, and it's gonna have an instance there. Instance means what is the algorithm, or what is the cipher, what kind of cipher I want to create. And then you put parentheses and then there's quotation marks here, and then inside these quotation marks you're gonna write down whatever the name of the cipher we're gonna use. In this case, we're gonna use DES. So in this particular case, I'm gonna write down DES. And remember, that has to be in capital letters. And that's it. If I were to create a cipher that is AES, then I will just change this part in here by AES. Or if there's some other cipher, then I will change this one also. So this is going to create an object of the class cipher that is going to use specifically, in this case, the DES algorithm. So we have just done that. So again, rectangle here, purple rectangle means that object there, which can have whatever name you want. I'm not going to write down anything. You can put any name you want in there for the DES. As of now, this line of code, what we have only done here is create the object. We haven't done anything with the object yet. In particular, for example, this cipher here, we don't even know if we haven't even said to Java yet if I'm gonna use that object for encryption or decryption, because those are different things. Now, to encrypt, then you have to tell Java what you want to do with that object. So basically, you just have the object there. You want to encrypt or decrypt. So you have to tell Java, do you want to decrypt or do you want to encrypt? So to encrypt, what you have to do, you have to set the object for encryption. So basically, you have to tell Java is this. I have this object. Now I have to set it to either encryption or decryption. So you have to tell Java that. And the way you do that is doing the following line. So you're gonna set the object to encryption. In this case, let's say we're gonna do encryption. What you're gonna do is you write the name of your object, which in this case I'm denoting by this purple rectangle. That's my object. Whatever name you put for it, you just put it over here. And then you're gonna initialize it. That's what this here is. I'm gonna initialize this object, or I'm gonna set it in such a way that's gonna be an encryption mode. And the way you do that is by typing all this. You're gonna say initialize, then parentheses, and you're gonna say Cipher, exactly the same as it is, Cipher that encryption mode, encrypt mode, and this all here has to be in capital. There I forgot to put all capitals, but this has to be all capitals. Encrypt underscore mode. So this is telling Java that all of this that is in here is telling Java this object, I'm gonna use it for encryption. This object of the class Cipher is gonna be used for encryption. So I'm gonna set it for encryption, and then comma, and in this purple and this I don't know what color, maybe green here, you put the DES key. Whichever you're gonna use, whatever DES key you're gonna use. You can either use the one that Java generates for you, or the one that you can use with strings. So whatever name you gave to the DES key, you put it over here, and of course a semicolon there at the end to close to finish that line. Again, this is all supposed to be in capital, so it's ENCRYPT. All of this are in capital here. So that's gonna initialize this object for encryption. Now you can use the same object for decryption. You don't have to create another object. The same object will encrypt and decrypt messages. Now this is the line of code that you're gonna add for encryption. Now if you wanna do decryption, you're gonna do almost exactly the same, but the only thing that's gonna change is this part over here. Instead of saying encrypt mode, it's gonna say decrypt mode. So let's see that. So to decrypt, what you're gonna set is you're gonna set this object to decrypt. You see, it's exactly the same as this one here, exactly the same line of code, except that this last part here says decrypt mode. So this is gonna set your object to decrypt. Again, this purple rectangle that is here is the name of your cipher, whatever name you gave it, and this is gonna initialize in decryption mode, and this rectangle here that is kind of green here is your DES key. That DES key we discussed in the first two videos. So whatever name you gave to the DES key, then you put it over here, and that's gonna do the decryption mode. And this is the encryption mode. You see that the codes are very similar. The only thing that changes is the last part here. Again, this is all supposed to be capital letters here in this part. So this is encryption mode, and that's decryption mode. Now, whatever you choose, either encryption or decryption, then that object is already set for whatever you told it. So you set it for encryption, so you get it at this, or you set it for decryption and you write it down like this. Now, how do you actually go about encrypting or decrypting something? So let's say, for example, to make it simple, let's just say we're gonna encrypt or decrypt a string of characters. So let's see how we're gonna do that. So in Java, what you're gonna do is the following thing. So to encrypt, decrypt, and remember which one is it? It depends on how you set your object. If you set it to encrypt, then the object is gonna encrypt, and you set it to decrypt, then the object will decrypt. So whatever you set in here, so whatever you say here in this line of code, decrypt is gonna be that one, and encrypt is gonna be this one. And remember, the DS key has to be the one that you put the name of the DS key is gonna be there. So let's say, for example, as I said, we're gonna encrypt or decrypt a string of characters. So what do? The first thing you have to do is you have to transform the string of characters into a byte array, and we already know how to do that. If you watch the previous video, the method for that is called getByte. And then, of course, you're gonna name it something. So whatever the string of characters it is that you put in there, you're gonna transform it into a byte array using the method getByte, and you're gonna call it whatever you want. That string of or that array of bytes, you're gonna call it. In this case, I'm gonna call it my bytes. You don't have to call it like that. You can call it whatever you want. And so you're gonna use that variable. Now, assuming that we're gonna do that, encrypt this string of characters, the code for encryption is gonna be like this. When you encrypt the DS is gonna give you a byte array. And this byte array is gonna be defined like this. So this is the code we're gonna write. So we're gonna remember that this rectangle purple here, purple rectangle, is my object, the DS cipher that I created. So you put the name of the cipher, the whatever the name you have. You said dot do final, and whatever the bytes of your string of characters, the one that you want to encrypt, you put it right here. So again, you the object, that is your DS cipher. You do dot do final with capital F, and then inside the parentheses you put the string of characters that you want to encrypt. But remember, first you have to translate that string of characters into a byte array. And so finally this is gonna give me a byte array. So I'm gonna store this byte array into a variable, which I didn't give a name here. I just denoted that by a yellow rectangle. So this yellow rectangle is gonna hold the byte array that comes out of here, of this encryption here, or decryption, depending on how you set up your cipher. And then of course this yellow rectangle is of type of byte array. So this is gonna do the encryption or decryption, depending on how you set up your cipher for encryption or decryption. So this is gonna work in Java. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna go to the Eclipse application, and I'm gonna show you exactly, giving of course names to variables in there. So I'll see you there. So I'm here now in the Eclipse application, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna explain a little bit more in detail the code here. Now, the first part of the code, the one that I'm going to highlight now, this part right here, that part is what we did in the previous video. So basically, the two lines that are over there, they're basically creating DS key in Java. Now, if you remember what we did from before, that is a randomly generated DS key. So I'm not providing a password, but if you want to provide a password, you can replace those lines there with the code that is with the password. So you can do that, one of the other. So this is not going to change. And you call the DS key with whatever name you want. So in this case, I'm calling here mine. It's called my DS key. So that's the DS key. Now remember, so this is what we did before. Now the next line that you see there, that line, is what I described in the video earlier, in this video, and that is creating an object of the class Cipher. And so what you can see there, the Cipher, that's the name of my object. That's what I was calling in the previous video. I was representing that with a purple rectangle. Now I'm gonna call it the Cipher because I have to give it a name. So again, you can give it whatever name you want. And this is the code that you put there, cipher.getInstance, and the DS that you see there, DS is just the name of the algorithm you're gonna use. Now, when you're typing this, Java is gonna say there are some errors and stuff like that. The only thing you have to do is hover over the line that is giving you the error. And so probably what you have to do is a couple of things. One, you have to import a library, or you have to throw an exception. And that's basically what the problem is if you type everything correctly. So that's declaring an object there. The next line is what we also talked in the video, is with that cipher, I have to make a decision, that object. Do I set it for encryption or decryption? And that is your choice, whatever you actually want to do. You want to encrypt or decrypt, whatever the situation is. So that line that you see there, the next line, it says, I'm going to say my name of the object. We remember in the earlier video, in this video, we were describing that as a purple rectangle. I'm going to initialize that cipher, and it's going to be initialized in encryption mode with the DS key that I created before, and that's called my DS key, which was created in this first step that you see there. Again, you can create the DS key with a password, and the code will be almost exactly the same. Just change those two lines of code there for whatever the code is when you have a password. So let's come back to that line again. So that line is initializing the cipher, setting up the cipher in encryption mode. And so now that that line, that's the only thing that it does. It just does the encryption mode there. Now the next thing, thing is declare the byte array. Now that byte array is whatever the message I want to encrypt. So let's say I want to encrypt the message. This message is important. That's the message I want to encrypt, and that is a string. So before you do that, remember what we did in the earlier video. What you do is you actually have to get that string of characters, and you have to make an array out of it. And the way you do that, remember, you say that get bytes. That's gonna make an array out of this string of characters, which is in this case, in my case, it's called this message is important. You can put whatever message you want in there, and of course you have to give it a name. So in this case, we are naming this my bytes. So it's called my bytes. Okay, so that translates the string of characters into a byte array. And you can see there I have some comments there to emphasize what I'm doing. So that defines my bytes, which those are the ones that I'm gonna encrypt. Now, because that's what I'm doing, so I set it up my cipher in encryption mode. So once I do that, then I am ready to encrypt whatever that byte array is. So I'm gonna encrypt the bytes from the string with the cipher. That's what my comment is there. So again, I'm gonna put that encryption or that byte array, which is the encrypted byte array. I'm gonna put it into some byte array, of course. So that byte array, I'm calling it my encrypted bytes. Now you can call it whatever you want. It doesn't matter what you call it, as long as you follow again the standards of Java. So I decided to call it my encrypted bytes. So, and the way you do it is, remember we did this in the video. I was representing this with I believe it was a yellow rectangle. What you do is you the name of your byte array, and then you say the cipher, whatever the cipher name you gave it. So in my case is the DES cipher, and then say do final, and then my bytes. That's whatever you put here in parentheses is the byte array you want to encrypt. And so that's it. So the bytes are encrypted, and they are in the variable my encrypted bytes, and that's it. So let's say, for example, you want to see what the encryption is. So basically what we encrypted was this message right here. This message is important, and so it was encrypted into a byte array using a DES cipher with whatever key was generated in Java. Now let's say, for example, I want to show in console what the byte array is. Now, if you put that line over there, and I run this program, let's see that. And you can see there, I'm just getting here the address of that byte array, and that we have seen that many times already. Whenever you want to print out in console a byte array, which is in this case my encrypted bytes is a byte array, then it's gonna just give you the address. What you have to do is you have to add a little bit of code to be able to see that byte array. So remember, from a while ago, I think we have used it like 3 or 4 times already. The code is arrays to string, right? That to string, and then of course I put that here, and then whenever you do this, Eclipse is gonna import whatever library you need for this. And I'm gonna scroll up. These are all the libraries we needed. Again, you don't have to memorize that, because once you use Eclipse, that's the good thing about Eclipse. You just hover over the line, and then it will import the library for you, and it is usually correct. So in this case, I will be able to see that byte array. And so what the byte array is, and byte array, which is my encrypted bytes, those are the bytes that are encrypted from this message here. This called this message is important. So let's run this program here, and let's see what happens. So if I run it, then that you can see that this is my encrypted byte array. All the numbers there are bytes. Okay, so it's quite lengthy because my message had some characters there, and so that's it. That's how you encrypt in DES. Now the encryption is exactly the same. The only thing that's gonna be different is you're gonna set up your cipher to decrypt. Now you can use the same ciphers. So in this line, I set up my cipher here for encryption. You can, for example, in the next line here, let's say for example in line 38, the one that you're seeing there, you can set up the same object to the encryption mode and decrypt that encryption bytes. So encryption decryption basically works the same. It just depends on whether you set up your cipher to encryption or decryption. So that's basically it. Now, there are some important things that I didn't mention here. One of them is padding. And remember, padding is important because you see this message here is probably not a multiple of 64. And if it's not a multiple of 64, the bytes, then remember the DES cipher works in blocks of 64. And if you have, for example, if this message is, for example, I'm not sure, it's going to be, for example, two and a half blocks of 64 bits, the DES cipher wouldn't know what to do with that because it's per blocks. But the good thing is that Java has implemented the DES, so it's gonna boot the padding for you. And if you could go up here that says no such padding exception, what that means is basically okay, this is an exception for DES, and what it's doing that is the DES is doing the padding for you automatically. There is a way to force that padding to do it in a certain way, and we're not gonna do that for now. We might do that later. So, but basically what I'm saying is there are some things that I didn't mention here, but this code will work if you put it in Eclipse. So that's it. That's how you encrypt or decrypt using the DES in Java. So that's all I have to say for DES in Java. Now, there are some things that you can also do, which is encryption of pictures or files and stuff like that doing the DES, and that can also be done. This example here is only for strings of characters. You can also use DES for encryption of other kinds of things. They don't have to be strings. As again I said, they could be pictures or files of any kind, and you can encrypt them with a key. But we will see that later. So for now, this is all I have to say about the DES in Java. So in the next video, we'll actually talk about another symmetric cipher, which is the modern symmetric cipher that people actually use today. So I will see you in the next video.